Hey everybody, welcome to Law and Justice Chapter 1, What is Law? What we're going to do in this chapter of this video is we'll look at the basis for law, where law comes from, what law, what our laws reflect, and sort of where they're supposed to go. So let's get into it. Where do laws come from, and sort of this topic of law and order, law and values, and really what we look at when we think of laws is something that reflects and promotes a society's values. What do we as a society deem to be important? And a lot of the time, those things are influenced by traditional ideas about what's right and wrong. And those ideas about what is right and wrong can come from a variety of places, okay? If we think about the sources of our laws, some of the very basic ideas about right and wrong actually go as far back as to the ancient Sumerians into Mesopotamia, some of those areas, Ur and Uruk, and really what we're looking at there is the Code of Hammurabi, that eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth type of ideology. We also see a basis of religious law, or canon, C-A-N-O-N, law that will influence our ideas about right and wrong. We also see an emphasis on Roman and English law, okay? And also that Roman code, that Justinian code, are huge, really, influences in what is right and what is wrong, and sort of where our laws come from. If we look at them, so laws are there to influence and be influenced by ideas of right and wrong. It's wrong to murder somebody. It's wrong to steal. It's wrong to lie. And laws are there to sort of promote those ideas and promote those values. And our legal system is really expected to achieve a lot of stuff, okay? It's expected to promote the basic human rights, freedom of speech, the right to be safe in your own home, the right to privacy, these things that we expect just in sort of basic necessity. Laws are there sort of to protect those and influence those things. They're there to promote fairness. We want things to be fair. You know, that's I hear that all the time as a teacher, and I'm sure you do. Well, that's not fair. Well, we want this to be fair. Laws are there to promote fairness. Businesses have to participate in a certain way, compete with each other in a certain way to promote fairness. In the same way, our legal system is designed. If you look at the image of Lady Justice, she is blind and she's holding a scale in her hands. You know, is going to even out. You're going into the process with no preconceived notions. Is going to be fair to you, and the best argument, the best case is going to win. Law is there to help also resolve conflicts. To be a little campy here, I think of Judge Marilyn Millian, Judge Judy, Judge Mathis. You know, some of those TV lawyers, TV judge shows. You know, they're resolving conflicts. Two groups of people, or two people have an issue with each other, and the law is going to help solve these issues. You know, if you crash into my car, or maybe not crash, let's do something a little bit less fair. You don't like me, and you figure out where I'm at, and you key my car, and I find out it's you. We're in conflict. The legal system will help resolve the conflict between you and me. And a little bit later in this unit, we're going to talk about how we resolve those conflicts. Laws are there to help also promote order and stability. We know how things are supposed to go. We know how people are supposed to behave. For those of you who have driver's license, have cars, there are laws that govern, you know, what you do in those cars to promote order and stability. There's speed limits. You have to drive on the right side of the road. A society without laws, life would be short, brutish, and nasty. You know, so that old quote from Hobbes, that Hobbesian idea. You know, you have to have laws to have a stable society. Otherwise, people are just out. Think of the movie Purge. You know, anything goes, and you just go out and kill whoever, do whatever you want to, because all laws are sort of banished. There's nothing there. Laws are also desired to promote social and economic behavior that we deem to be appropriate. Okay, we have certain laws that deem how we're supposed to behave toward each other. You know, we can't go into a movie theater and scream out bomb or fire or something and cause mass chaos and panic. That, you know, we have laws that prevent that. You know, that's a desirable social behavior. We have laws that make sure the things that we buy, the things that we consume, are safe. I just recently got a recall notice for my truck. It was really weird because it said your truck is currently, it has this part that has to be recalled. It's part of the airbag system, part of the GM recalls service. And they said, but don't worry, your car's safe to drive. It's just there's a part that's not safe in the car. I didn't really understand that. But nevertheless, they're there to promote economic behavior that is fair. They're also there to ensure fair competition. We have those laws that ban monopolies. The legal systems are there also to represent the will of the majority. And that's one of those hard things in a democracy sometimes to understand or to wrap around our heads if we're not in the majority. The people who vote and the people who win the majority of the vote, they get to have their way. Now, they don't have an unlimited right to that. That's sort of that last bullet point there sort of balances that. But the majority really has a heavy right there to have their belief structure, the things they want, their issues, their values, their ideals promoted. But minorities also have a right there as well. And the law is there to help promote or protect the rights of minorities to keep the majority from crushing them and overriding them. So I've sort of dealt with this a little bit. So what are laws based on? Well, if we look at all those things that laws are supposed to do, laws are also based on moral values, economic values, political, social values, and really a combination of them. They can be either or all of the above, or a mix of those. It's like a buffet. You can choose one, or you can choose two, or you can choose all four of those, okay? Moral values deal with fundamental questions of right and wrong. A great example of that, murder, okay? Is it okay to murder somebody? And our society says no, okay? That cold-blooded murder is not a right that you have. It is something that is wrong, and our laws are going to set that up to punish you if you commit murder, okay? Even if it's unintentional, if we're talking about manslaughter, something you didn't mean to do, it was unintentional, it was negligent homicide, negligent manslaughter, you can be punished because you did something that was wrong. Economic values. How do we deal with the accumulation, the preservation, the use and distribution of wealth? Tax cuts, shoplifting, how do we handle money? How do we handle issues and values that deal with our monetary and business systems? Now that's a whole great discussion if we were in current events to talk about the accumulation, with the election going on, with accumulation, preservation, use, and distribution of wealth. But for us, we're really going to look at sort of the shoplifting, robbery, theft, and how that deals with it, and how that deals with us as a society. Political values reflect the relationship between the government and its individual. What should the government do, and what should the government not do? When we think about that, we would like to think that laws are purely based or not purely based on political motives. But in reality, politics plays an effect, a huge part of all laws that are done. What can you get passed in Congress and how can it be? We're going to talk a little bit about reviews for that civics lesson on how our laws are made. They also face or are based on social values, concern issues that are important to society. We have education laws. You've heard a lot, I'm sure, about Common Core, about testing. You're probably, one of the things that you deal with, we don't think of it as a law, but budgets are in fact a form of law. It sets out what the government can spend. It sets out those political values in terms of what the government can do. How many police officers can we pay for to keep the public safe? How many teachers can we hire to educate you, the students? This is one of the reasons we're sort of in this class now online, is that we faced budget cuts this year. And the state said, look, you don't have the money to have these 7 additional teachers, so you can either get rid of the classes, or you can scrape up a lesser amount of money and teach them online. Now, the state didn't give the money for that. The counties had to come up with the money, but they came together to do that, and so that we were still able to offer that. So social values are part of that. And those are issues could be not just solely related to education. I use that because, I'm a teacher. But we could talk about abortion. We could talk about voting rights. We can talk about this whole Black Lives Matter movement that's going on in society, as well as that sort of values over into political issues and political values. See, all these things really will combine with each other to influence what laws are based on. And so they really do. It's very rare that you'll go and see a law that deals solely with a single one of these four sort of value areas. Okay, most often they're going to be combined. Laws are also designed to balance rights and responsibilities. Okay, and that's always where it's an interesting level. What individual rights do we have versus what are our social responsibilities? And people who believe, and there's, I think, a decent argument to be made, the government does all these things and then people aren't involved, okay? And in my opinion, and sort of what we see within the law and justice section, and within this legal issue, is the belief that individual rights and social responsibilities really should be matched. Now, there's no way really to legislate that these have to be matched, especially if we look at that second bullet point under there, or third bullet point. If you want politicians to listen to represent you, you should vote, and you should be involved. There's no way to force that, because sometimes politicians, you vote, you get involved, and politicians still ignore you. But the idea is that if we want our voices heard, if we want somebody to do something, we should be willing to take a step to fix that, or to be involved in that process. If you want to have a jury at a trial, you should be willing to serve on a jury. And remember, if you think back to your civics course, for those of you who haven't had civics, you're going to hear this again in civics. One of those basic duties that you have, yes, if you need to go ahead and laugh because I said duty, go right ahead. I probably said it a few more times in this course. But one of those basic duties that you have as a citizen is to serve your country, not just in the military, but in the act of being on a jury. Okay? That's something that you should do. The other thing that we have to look at when we talk about balancing rights and responsibilities is this idea that just because I have the right to do something, is it a good thing to do? Okay? And that can be a very touchy, very tricky subject when we get into thinking about the world. And the example that I think of when I look at this bottom one, I have the right to do something. Is it socially responsible? Is it responsible? Is it a good thing to do it? I have the right, and you have the right, as a citizen of the United States, to burn the American flag in protest. You can douse it with gasoline, kerosene. Probably I would prefer not do that. But, again, you have the right to do that. You can stand out and light it on fire, and you have the right to do that. Okay, the Supreme Court has protected your right. But is that a good thing to do? Personally, and this is Mr. Thornburg as a person, not as a teacher, because I cannot tell you what you should feel. But me, my opinion is that no, it's not a good thing to do. I had two grandfathers who served in World War II. One grandfather received a very nasty wound during the Battle of the Bulge. He bled for the country. My other grandfather served in the Navy. I have a great uncle who served in the military and has seen things. He was part of the crew that rescued the members of the USS Indianapolis, who carried the first nuclear atomic bomb, to the island of Tinian to be dropped on Hiroshima. He rescued the crew of the Indianapolis after it had been sunk and saw just absolutely horrible things. I would be offended if I saw you burning an American flag, but you have the right to do that. Okay, and that's something that we have to think about within the legal rights. Okay, what do you have the right to do, and do you have a responsibility to do it, or do you have a responsibility maybe to not do it? And it's a balancing question. And it's a great point of discussion and a great point of contention. And quite frankly, I would fight for your right, and I will fight for your right if you so choose to burn the American flag. Again, I would prefer that you not do that, because that would be a very bad thing. Okay, so we sort of get the basis of where our laws are and how they are influenced, and rights versus responsibilities, and the balancing act there, and it's tough. It's very tough. I'm going to flip back here real quick. Some people want to put laws in place that says if you want to have a jury trial and you've been called to serve on a jury and you get excused because you've gotten out of it, through foul or fair means. You've intentionally got yourself excused from the jury, then you shouldn't have the right to do that. I don't think you can do that, because then you get into a really tricky situation. So we get that idea of balancing rights and responsibilities. Now we get to sort of in this first chapter, types of laws that we have, kinds of laws. And these are the big ones. Again, this is sort of a review from civics. The first type of law that we have is criminal law. Okay? Criminal laws simply relate public conduct and set out duties owed to society. Okay? Criminal law is what we see with criminal law is it's a legal action brought by the government against a person accused of committing a crime. And this is where the Roman style law is. If you go out and you commit a crime, okay, whether it be a felony or misdemeanor, and you can see their felonies are more severe crimes, generally more than 1 year in jail or lots and lots of money, and they're generally more serious crimes such as murder or robbery or kidnapping, etc., etc., etc. Misdemeanors generally have less severe punishment, okay, generally less than a year and or community service and or a fine, okay, and that's less than a year in jail. They are generally a less serious crime, simple assault, minor theft, some type of vandalism charge, keying a car or spray painting your school. Those generally are misdemeanor type crimes. Though if you commit them to a certain level, they are most certainly going to become felonies, okay? So, but here's how the criminal system works. Let's say you commit a crime. I'll use myself as an example. Let's say, for example, I go out and I'm driving alone and I realize that over there is my ex-girlfriend's house and I don't like her, and I put the accelerator to the floor and I push up the speed and I drive my car through her house. Okay? Extreme example, I know. That's a felony. Okay? So first of all, that would be a felony. But who punishes it? Who brings legal action against me? My ex-girlfriend's parents or her family, or she doesn't arrest me. They don't charge me with the crime. They don't try me before a court and a jury. The government does. Because when you commit a crime, you don't just commit a crime against the person that you immediately affected. Committing a crime, you've indirectly affected everybody in society by violating those societal norms, those societal rules of behavior. And so society, the government, is going to be the one that brings the legal action against you. So if I drove my car into my ex-girlfriend's house, the government would arrest me for that crime. Okay, and the government would try me of a felony. Okay, a felony attempted vehicular manslaughter. I don't know what they would call that. Serious vandalism or something. I'm not sure, but that's how that would work. And misdemeanors, if you go to Walmart and you steal a TV, you trying to run out the store with the big new 60 inch TV under your arm, and you get caught by the police officer that's standing outside, that's probably going to be a misdemeanor. It might be a felony. I don't know. Whichever one it is, Walmart doesn't arrest you. The government arrests you. And that's sort of how it goes. If you have so that's sort of what you're looking at. Okay, that's criminal law. The other type of law we have are called civil laws. Okay, civil laws regulate relationships between individuals or between groups of individuals. Okay, civil action is a lawsuit brought by a person who feels that someone else has injured them or wronged them. Okay, generally, outcomes in civil laws, civil cases are monetary in nature, meaning money. Okay, generally, civil laws do have no jail. It would be very, very strange for a civil action to result in jail time. Generally, only going to be if you committed perjury. And they regulate everyday situations such as marriage, divorce, contracts, real estate, insurance, consumer protection, and negligence. If you want to see an example of civil laws, think of, I mentioned these three judges earlier, Judge Mathis, Judge Judy, Judge Marilyn Milan. They deal with civil laws. Well, so-and-so came in, wrecked the fence on my property, and they told me they'd build it back, and they didn't build it back, or they built it back, but it didn't look exactly the same, and I'm suing them because they damaged my property. Okay, that's a civil law. They didn't break a law that injured somebody. Okay, they didn't break a law that violated societal norms. They did something directly to another person. And so therefore they're going to sue, okay, a civil action. And they're going to get money for that. Another type of civil action is if somebody's negligent. Let's say that you're out there, you've got a house, you graduated high school, you've got a house, and you're keeping it up, and you dug a hole in the middle of your yard, but you didn't put anything around it that says, watch out, there's a hole in my yard, and somebody walks in through your yard and falls in. Okay, if they had the right to be in your yard, okay, and that's important, if they had the right to be there, there was a just reason for them to be there, then you could be actually charged with negligence and could be sued for being negligent, for not doing your due diligence in keeping the person on your property safe. Now, if you just put no trespassing signs up and they get onto your yard and they fall in, it's just going to be harder to sue. Now, there are some states that have generally larger loopholes, I should say, in that regard. There was a case out west a few years ago, and this is one of these stupid law situations I'm going to share with you all semester long. You're probably going to be tired of hearing about them, but then it was actually a man who broke into a house. I want to say this is maybe California, but don't hold me to this. A man broke into a house. He broke in through the house and was moving everything into the garage. He wasn't a great thief. I'm going to go ahead and tell you that now. But he got into the house. He was moving things into the garage. It's sort of a staging area before he brought up his van to load everything up. On one of those trips, he managed to get the door behind him shut, and it got jammed, and he could not get back into the house through the garage door, through the door into the house from the garage. The garage door was jammed shut. It was broken. It could not be opened. Something had happened to it. I don't remember the exact details. But anyway, the man sort of was stuck in the house. The family was actually out on vacation, so he was stuck in there. He was stuck in there a few days until the family came home and discovered their house. They called the police. The man was arrested. He eventually turned around and attempted to sue them because they had not kept proper maintenance up on their house. Their door was faulty. The garage door opener was faulty. And he tried to sue. He lost, but he made that attempt through negligence. Okay. Off of that, some terminology that you need to know that's going to really benefit you. If you don't know this terminology, the rest of this course is going to be really, really difficult for you. Defendant, okay? The person who is accused of a crime or is accused of having harmed someone or having broken a contract. So this is the person who goes, I didn't do it. Okay? That's what's going on here. The prosecution or the plaintiff is the person who is doing the accusing. The prosecution is a criminal case, okay? And that's the government. So going back to I drove my car into my ex-girlfriend's house. The government is the prosecution, okay? They're bringing the case. If you slipped and fell in my driveway, you would be the plaintiff, okay? You said I didn't do something right. I hurt you. That would be the plaintiff, okay? So in a civil case, it's a plaintiff. In a criminal case, it's the prosecution. The next two terms are really important, okay? Beyond a reasonable doubt and preponderance of the evidence. Beyond a reasonable doubt is a term used only for criminal cases. And in a criminal case, the prosecution, the government, has to prove to the jury, beyond a reasonable doubt, that the defendant has committed the crime. Now, that is not beyond a shadow of a doubt, beyond any doubt. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. Okay, and that question of reasonable is really going to play in there. You know, what does it mean to be reasonable? It doesn't mean that there's not a possibility. You know, well, he didn't do the crime because there's another guy who looks, similar to him that was in the same area, who not in the same area but lives in the same town. Well, the jury cannot find that. It has to find that man innocent because there's another man who looks similar to him but lives, in the same city. That doesn't make sense, okay? It's beyond a reasonable doubt. I believe that is a good possibility that this guy did it. If you watch the movie 12 Angry Men, beyond a reasonable doubt, that the guy played by Henry Fonda pulls out that knife that looks just like the murder weapon. Well, before he did that, the jurors were all saying, well, that's the only time I've ever seen a knife like that. It's a very rare-looking knife. If that's the only knife in town that was found on the boy identified it as his, the boy must be guilty. And then Fonda pops out that knife and sticks it in the table, and they're like, oh, there's another knife just like it. Wow, that looks just like the other one. If there's another knife like that, it's reasonable to assume that maybe this man that maybe there was another man out there who had a knife like the boy's, okay? If the jury has a reasonable doubt, that there's a reasonable belief that the person maybe didn't do it, they must vote not guilty. You cannot convict somebody based on how they look or about how they feel, or how you feel about that person. In a civil case, you're dealing with preponderance of the evidence, okay? And all you have to do in a civil case is, if you're suing somebody, all you have to do is convince the judge or the jury that it's more than likely that the complaint is true. So if you sue me for slipping and falling in my driveway, all you have to do is convince the jury that more than likely it was my fault that you slipped and fell. There was something that I did. You don't have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. You just have to show enough evidence to suggest to the judge or jury that you're right and I'm wrong. Okay, and that's sort of how that's going to work. If you have any questions about those, feel free to hit me up in the chat room or in the discussion dialogue boxes. I'd be glad to discuss those two terms a little bit more for you. Okay, so a little bit more on where our laws come from. We're going to wrap this up. I'm running this one a little bit long. I get long-winded sometimes. Where do our laws come from? The U.S. Constitution. The Constitution is the idea of limited government. Now, we can argue ad nauseum, at length, about what our government is today, but we're really not in the current events class, okay? But that's the basic principle of the government is limited government and separation of powers, both within the federal government and within the federal powers, between federal, state, and local governments. So separation of powers comes in the idea of the three main articles of the Constitution. Article 1, which is the legislative branch. The legislative branch creates laws or statutes, okay? The executive branch, or Article 2, enforces the laws or statutes. And the judicial branch, Article 3, interprets the laws and assigns consequences for the violation of those laws, okay? Now, within that, the U.S. Constitution also sets up a system of checks and balances. Each branch of government can stop the other branch of government from doing something. For instance, if the legislative branch writes a law, the president can veto it, but the legislative branch can override that veto, okay, and say, no, we want this to be a law. The executive branch gets to choose who judges are. The president gets to nominate his choices for judges, but the legislative branch has to approve those presidential appointments. And if they don't like the person the president chose, they get to say, you can't have that person. And the executive branch and the president has to choose somebody else. The judicial branch has the right to declare a law unconstitutional, okay? And that's a pretty significant, a law unconstitutional or an executive action unconstitutional, which is pretty significant, and they sort of make their own laws. Now, they can only do that in two instances, where the Constitution does not permit the government to do something, or if the law that was made or the action that was taken violates somebody's rights. But the check on the judicial branch is that the president gets to appoint the members of the judicial branch, and Congress gets to approve them. So there's this nice sort of interweaving focus or balance back and forth between these three branches of government. Our laws also come from this idea of federalism, from power divided between federal, state, and local governments. There are things that the federal government can do, there are things that the state and local governments can do. And in a lot of cases, those do not overlap. We also see a Bill of Rights and 17 other amendments to the U.S. Constitution, a total of 27 amendments. Bill of Rights are the first 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution, and they set forth the basic rights that we have as citizens. If you've had civics, you've hopefully learned those Bill of Rights. The First Amendment are your 5 basic rights, what we call RAPS, the freedom of religion, assembly, press, petition, speech. Second Amendment is the right to bear arms, so on and so forth. And generally what we see the amendments doing is they limit government power over citizens and over the states. Additionally, within each state sets up its own government. They set up its own constitution, and each state generally has a list of amendments, a Bill of Rights, so to speak. And those laws come from and underneath the U.S. Constitution. And with that, we're going to wrap up our Chapter 1 PowerPoint. I apologize, it's been about 30 minutes. I really didn't intend for it to take this long. I'm going to try to make sure that my other ones are shorter.